Okay, we've talked pretty extensively now about the Reformation, and we focused pretty much exclusively on the problems the Reformers or the Protestants had with the Catholic Church. You got Luther and the selling of indulgences. Um, both Luther and Calvin and many of the others talking about how the church had moved away from the original message and that it really had to be faith-based and based, everything needed to be based on the Bible, the good works and the penance and the buying of and selling and donating to the church and all this stuff. Didn't matter. You had Henry's whole deal with wanting to get married and deciding that he would be the head of the church. And you have a whole lot of other things going on within this that we've talked about, beginning with Wycliffe and Huss translating Bibles into the vernacular. All of these problems are mounting on the leaders of the church, and most of it falls on the Pope to try to figure out a way out of this. So I want you to take a minute and imagine that you are Pope Paul III. You're upset by the actions and acts of heresy by Protestants. What are some of the possible solutions to stopping the Reformation? I'd like you to stop the video and write down as many as you can think of. Okay, so now, what they came up with, and we'll see how much you got that was similar, was what became known as the Counter-Reformation. And the purpose of this was a reform movement within the Catholic Church to strengthen the church and to try to stem the tide of Catholics converting to Protestantism. Pope Paul calls the council in 1545, so it takes them nearly 30 years after the advent of Luther's 95 Thesis to actually sit down and say, geez, we have a problem, we should do something about it. The council met on and off for 20 years, and it reaffirmed many traditional Catholic beliefs, but it also works on ending abuses, ends the sale of indulgences, and creates an index, a list of banned books, so that they were going to make sure that people couldn't read the stuff by these reformers. Okay? At the Council of Trent, here's what they did. They reaffirmed the Catholic teachings of the seven sacraments. See if I can get them all in order here. You have baptism, communion, penance, confirmation, marriage, holy orders, and the last rites. They reaffirmed the authority of the Pope. The Pope, to this day, is believed to be infallible because he is believed to be divinely inspired by God. That's how he's elected, is through divine inspiration. God is infallible, therefore the Pope is infallible. They state that good works and faith together ensure salvation. They invent the rule or firm up the rule of celibacy for priests and nuns, trying to overcome this, one of the key problems people have with priests having families, including the Pope. All religious orders must renounce worldly pleasures. Priests, monks, nuns, anybody that enters Catholic service has to take a vow of poverty. They end nepotism, taking care of family members. They end simony, the selling of church offices. No more indulgences. They establish the index, and then they establish the Inquisition, which is a court to try heretics. Okay. In addition to that, the Society of Jesus, or the Jesuits, is founded by Ignatius Loyola. They're a religious order, emphasized strict moral and spiritual life. They saw themselves as the defender of the Catholic Church, and these are the men that go out as missionaries with the Spanish explorers and Portuguese explorers especially, but many of the others, and they spread Catholicism to Africa, Asia, and the Americas. They're still around today. The Jesuits run Lemoyne University, or Lemoyne College. Notre Dame University is run by Jesuits, as is Boston College, Georgetown. A lot of major universities run by the Jesuits. Okay, so they're still a very powerful force within the Catholic Church. And then finally, the Inquisition. Okay, and this is probably one of the most insidious outcroppings of this movement to reform the church, is the Inquisition. Okay, it's when the church used a court made up of church officials to root out heresy by force. Trials are often held, often using torture, to find people suspected of having beliefs that differed from church teachings. Okay, and basically, there's two outcomes to this trial. you're brought before the trial, you can immediately confess right off the bat, and you will just be sentenced to life in prison. If you refuse to confess, you will then be tortured until you do confess, and then you will be burned at the stake. And the idea of burning at the stake comes from the rules that the priest, the church is not allowed to shed blood, so they can't chop off your head or shoot you or any other kind of thing like that. So they come up with this burning of the stake because technically no blood is shed when you burn a body. Okay, so Reformation is quite insidious. It really takes hold in Southern Europe, Spain especially, also in France, Italy, and the areas surrounding. It never really takes hold in Germany and England, some of the areas where Protestantism is at its peak. So it's somewhat ineffectual, but it goes down in history as something that's remembered as a terrible thing. Okay, many religious wars are fought. Britain and France, the wars between them that went on for centuries, often had religious overtones because Britain is Protestant, France is Catholic. Many died due to persecution. France, because it's kind of a mix of Protestant and Catholic, especially during the times when the English king controlled large pieces of France, you have a whole lot of Protestant influence in there, and the Inquisition was strong, and there's a lot of persecution of the Protestants. At one point in time, Louis XIV actually outlaws Protestants. Okay, eventually toleration develops, but it's still a factor. Northern Ireland, only in the last 15 years has Northern Ireland known peace. Prior to that, you had fighting between Catholic and Protestants, and you still have some uneasiness between the people. Okay, so I want you to complete the video quiz and submit it.